The Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Today on the podcast, the recording of the May 25th BSR event, The Power of Food Media, a conversation with Kehlani Palmisano and BSR. This panel was moderated by Associate Editor Kyle V. Hiller. Here is the recording of The Power of Food Media.
Greetings, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you for coming through. It's good to see faces and seats. I'm glad everybody came downstairs with their food and grub. You know, we're all just hanging out here having a good time. So thank you for joining us once again. My name is Kyle V. Hiller. I'm the Associate Editor of Broad Street Review, and I love food, and my audio is cutting out, but it's cool because we're going to just roll with it here. But the Power of Food Media, that's what we're here for today, and we have lovely guests here. I'm going to go around the panel here and let everyone introduce themselves, if you don't mind, and we'll start with Kehlani.
Sure. Hi, my name is Kehlani Palmisano. I host Check Please Philly on WHYY. I also write and host a PBS food series called Delishtory, which explores the history and culture of food. And I should also mention that Check Please Philly is like a restaurant series. So it explores dining around the region from Bucks County, South Jersey, all the way down to Delaware, Main Line, and Philadelphia, of course, Philadelphia, all through the lens of locals. And it's a really fun project to work on. And yeah, I just kind of write freelance every now and again. And I, produce little side projects like Power Dining, this podcast that I launched like yesterday.
Nice. All right.
Hi, I'm Margaret Ebi. I'm the Deputy Food Editor at the Philly Inquirer. Before that, I worked at Food 52 and Food and Wine and a now defunct all-breakfast site called Extra Crispy. I know, RIP to a real one. It was awesome. I write also sporadically for a bunch of different places, and I am working on a cookbook for depressed people. So that's me.
Wow.
Hey, I'm Alicia. I'm a freelance food journalist. My main gig these days is doing the Resy Hit List, which is like their kind of roundup dining guide that I inherited from Kehlani last year. Also, I write for The Inquirer, I write for Eater, I write for Billy Penn, who am I forgetting? Edible. Basically, any local publication that has a food section, I've been very blessed and privileged to contribute to. I've been writing since I started at a travel startup back in 2010. I have a blog, Justice for Bloggers. We are not dead and gone. I firmly believe that bloggers and food bloggers still exist in this ecosystem. So yes, if I don't write for publication, then I'll just put it on my site.
Well, that's awesome. So a lot of writing happening here, a lot of freelancing, a lot of side project stuff happening, which is really cool. But before we get into all that stuff, I do want to set up some icebreakers here. Get everybody a little bit loose. I gave y'all some notes a few days ago, and I said, hey, I'm not telling you what the question is because I like to keep everybody on their toes. So, your last meal, what would it be?
Oh.
I know mine. So I have a shellfish allergy, so my thing is give me the seafood tower. Like, I want to go out like Alana from Broad City. Like, don't give me the EpiPen. Bring it on. Like, yep. All the shellfish I can't eat, give me that seafood tower. That's my death meal.
That's a really hard, I guess I'll take a shot at it.
It's not set in stone today, but whatever calls from your heart right in this moment is your last meal.
I guess, I really do love fried chicken. And I grew up eating a lot of KFC because my uncle worked there, and every night he would come home, and that was what we had for dinner, like dome cake and all, like with the chocolate and so that would probably be just hearkening back to that ultimate comfort food of childhood KFC.
Yeah, I could echo that. That'd be up there.
Man, I it's very hard to follow such a metal approach to the last meal. Like what would kill you is also it's perfect. I feel like I would like a perfect wedge salad and a baked potato and a slice of my dad's apple pie and like one exquisite martini, probably is what I do. And then maybe also champagne because I'm dying, right? Like, whatever. Okay.
Dying transition, it doesn't have to be that hardcore. But yeah, no, I think fried chicken is definitely up there for me. I'd probably throw in some fries in there as well. I'm not sure what kind because I still feel like I'm on the search for the perfect French fry. I'm not sure that it exists, but I don't know. That could be something.
What makes a good French fry?
What makes a good French fry? Oh my goodness. Okay. The level of crispiness is very important because I think it's so easy to under crisp or over crisp your fries. And I think also I'm so used to corner store French fries that have way too much grease. And I'm just like, it's so good, but I can't stop. But I don't know, somewhere in the middle there. And I don't know that, I don't know where to find it.
So we've got like wedges,
Right.
waffle fries,
Yeah,
like
so-
shoestring.
Okay, so
curly.
Now it's gonna get
we're gonna get to that minutia here. All right, I'm gonna pick waffle fries. If they're cheese fries, I want waffle fries.
Ooh.
If they're plain fries, I want tater tots.
Oh.
Steak frites are just too thick for me. I'm sorry. I like to grab a whole bunch of fries at once. You can't really do that with steak frites. And any fry that's just like pommes frites, all this Parmesan cheese and all this other stuff, this fancy stuff. Like, no, don't do that. Just give me some yellow sauce on these fries.
What do
coming in
you
hot.
dip them into? Yeah.
Personally, Tostitos queso salsa dip.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
where it's at for me. So maybe that is my last meal. I think it's that. I might have to just make my own fries, which is fine. All right. So now that we know what our last meal is, what have you been eating, cooking, craving lately?
Well, so for the past couple of weeks, I've been remodeling my kitchen.
Ooh.
So we haven't had a sink or a stove for like 2 weeks.
Oh,
We
boy.
just got it back like yesterday. And that's been really challenging, especially, here's also a fun note. I am 20 weeks pregnant. So it was pregnancy, remodeling a kitchen, coming out with this podcast. And then, so my go-to though, I've been really craving like breakfast, all kinds of breakfast. Omelets. Yesterday I had a stack of pancakes with pork roll in between all the stacks with like a maple bechamel topped with a fried egg. And I was like, only one fried egg, give me 2 more. And I ate half of it yesterday and the other half today. So really it's just been, I've been on the breakfast train,
Okay.
hardcore.
I have a defunct website for you.
I really
Yeah.
I dreamed of actually
I know.
writing for y'all and I never got a chance to.
I know. I've been in my tofu era, which, I always liked eating it, but I never quite got the hang of cooking it. And then thanks to dinner at a friend's house where she made it really well, I was like, wait, I think I could probably figure this out. And so now I'm just making all kinds of tofu, like buffalo tofu and, like tofu in various sauces and marinated. And yeah, that's been my big thing lately.
Yeah, tofu's hard. Low key.
I would say I'll broaden the time period for lately and say that since the pandemic hit, and I wrote about this actually for the Inquirer, I've done a deep dive into making more Puerto Rican food. I am Puerto Rican. I grew up, like many other Hispanic people, not being taught any recipes because we don't share them. We hold them secret, and then when you go off to the world, figure it out. And you call your mom and your grandma for advice. So when the pandemic hit and I got those cravings and I realized I probably can't get them at a restaurant, I got to learn it myself. I did a deep dive into, honestly, like memories of textures and flavors, and then trying to go to the grocery store and kind of matching that up. So I would say that I'm trying to practice more and more cooking Puerto Rican food like the way that I grew up. So I'll say that.
Does that feel like reconnecting in that way? Like, what are some of the challenges to remembering? You know, like, do you feel like it was one of those things where you had to really go back to maybe family and all this other stuff, or like what was the process of actually remembering how to make and how things tasted, what the texture was? That's so important.
Yeah. So one of the challenges is that I'm actually estranged from my family, so I do not have a relationship with my mother or my father, and barely my sister. So I can't count on them to call them up. So it really was an exercise of, well, where did I eat this food outside of like my home? And so it was going back to trips, going to like the Bronx and going to like little diners, and how is that steak cooked, and was it, you know, super flat, and you know, the plantains were like, they have to have this crisp. So it was really trying to go back to memorizing, like what it tasted like. And it's a very powerful thing, because like making something like Puerto Rican steak and onions, I know that I did it correct when it tastes exactly like how I had it at that place in the Bronx. That's when I know I nailed it. So it's extra challenging for me these days. But the other thing too is like there's actually more cookbooks available these days. Von Diaz has a wonderful cookbook, so I go to her cookbooks a lot. And just going to like the library, shout out to the library for researching this stuff. And just trying to find it through cookbooks and like just recipe testing over and over again until I get that steak exactly the way that I remember it. So, yeah.
All right. So for everyone here, keeping things like that in mind, what really got you into food, and what got you into food writing? Because I imagine it wasn't just the food, you know, like there's so many other things going on around the plate.
Yeah, I guess I've thought a lot about this. It's like, for me, it's kind of like a two-pronged thing. It was, I got into food writing through travel writing, but I got into travel writing because I was really yearning to know that there was like a world that was bigger and better outside of the world that I kind of grew up in. And then the second part of it was later on, I kind of found out the importance of letting people know, like myself, or who might have been stuck in worlds like I was stuck in, to know that there was like a world bigger and better that was out there for them. So I'll just like preface this with like very dark journey to get to this point. But I grew up in like a really tough, I had a really tough childhood. Food was scarce, money was very scarce. My dad was like extremely abusive to my mom and I. I was also the product of an interracial relationship where my white side of the family was like not too keen on having me around. So I was like in a world that was really small and isolated. But I never believed that would limit me. And like, thankfully, that was really because of like people who were around me. Like my mom's parents were really influential in making sure that I never felt limited. My mom always like showed me through her hustle, like how she could create like a better life for us just from doing extra. Like she would always bake cakes and cookies on the side to make extra money to make sure that we would like have the advantages that I wouldn't necessarily have access to. So she'd like bake a cake. She'd come home from her day job, bake a cake, spend all night on it, and then like make $25 out of it. She also charged way under what she should have been charging for her cakes, but she'd make like $25 from it just so like she could send me to a field trip. And so like there was all of these experiences and also other stories. Like I had access to other motivational stories, and that was like really I could see like, oh, if they can do it, then so can I. And so, through saving lots of money for years. I think my first big trip was I paid for myself to do a study abroad in Germany. And then like when your life and when your world is so small, and then you get to do something big like that, the ability to be able to go and travel is more than just like going to a place. It's like all of a sudden you start to learn like how, you know, you can manage, you feel freedom, so it's like the act of traveling became like bigger than just the like travel itself. It was just like a really expansion. So like I felt this level of expansion. I was like, I just want to keep doing that kind of thing where I keep expanding, but I also want to share those expansive experiences with other people. So came back from Germany shortly after. My dad actually kicked me out, and that's actually how I got to Philadelphia. So despite years of like housing insecurity, food insecurity, and just like struggling overall, I was like, I still want to be a travel writer. I was like really had the audacity to just like dream about this thing, but I was like, oh, I can't afford to travel, but so why don't I just like write about Philadelphia for other people? So I did kind of the thing my mom did, where she was baking cakes in all of her spare time. I just started writing about Philadelphia in all of my spare time. So I'd work during the day, I'd write about Philadelphia nights and weekends. That was around 2010. And like I just kind of felt this barrier to entry where it was like I was making decent side income and I really wanted to like make the jump into media, but there still felt like there was this like invisible barrier. Like I couldn't make that switch. I couldn't make that leap. And then unfortunately, my father passed away from suicide, and I ended up inheriting a kind of modest inheritance from him. And it was only then that I realized, I'm like, oh, now I can, I was able to pay off my student loan, and I got stability, I could eat, I could have food. And when you like don't have access to those things, when you don't have access to food seems very different to you when suddenly you get access to it. Suddenly it's like you have a deeper appreciation for it. So I had a very deep appreciation for these experiences, and I wanted people to also have that same deep appreciation for like food and for travel and for that level of expansion. And but it also was kind of a bummer to know that like unfortunately having access to money and support and like those resources gave me the ability to go like network. There wasn't really a big community here in Philadelphia. In 2014 was when that happened. And so I had to go to like New York a bunch of times to like meet editors and meet people, and that was like when I was able to make the switch. So the second prong of like what got me into food writing was like when I was able to kind of make that switch, and suddenly I got into rooms that I didn't have access to before, and with people who never really understood or maybe even thought about people like me or people that had gone through experiences like that. And so then it became really important for me and a mission for me to be like, well, I want to make sure that people know that this can be possible for them, and this is like a bigger world where these stories are bigger. So that's kind of been my core mission, like in my work. That's kind of how I got here. Yeah.
Oh, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that's such a huge thing that maybe people who are just casuals like me, when it comes to like thinking about food writing or reading about it or learning about it, watching shows about it, that we don't really always capture, that sort of that backstory, that how painful it can be to not have food and not have access to food, or just all the other things that kind of come with, what's going on in the household. So yeah, that really resonates. So thank you for sharing that.
It just that deeper appreciation. It's like I have a lot of privilege now, but with that privilege, I also realize that I don't think privilege is really a problem. The problem becomes when people don't realize that they have the privilege, and then when they like take their privileges for granted, and then it becomes a dangerous problem. Really, when like people like expect that those privileges are owed to them and they start to behave in that way. So it's something that has really kept me grounded along my entire journey and has kept me hopefully relatable to people, is that like I know that I'm very privileged now, but I will never take it for granted. Like And just the deepening of the appreciation of the experiences that I do get to have now is like, well, I just want to be able to express that to people so that they can appreciate it just as much as I do.
Yeah, privilege is fine as long as you have the gratitude.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Your thoughts on just food and how you got there to writing it?
Sure.
Writing about it.
I started out as a kind of generalist, like as a culture and arts reporter, and also as a very enthusiastic, but I suspect extremely mediocre cook. I look back and I do not understand how I survived from age 20 to 23 on, I don't think I had seasonings. Like, I don't know what I did. And I had the good fortune of catching an assignment from an editor at Men's Journal about Canadian whiskey. And he was like, I don't know, you write about stuff. You want to write about this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I just started talking to people about like nuances in Canadian whiskey, and I guess I did okay because then I somehow was like writing a lot about whiskey for him, despite really being like, yeah, I know what that is. It's brown. It's good. Like, yeah. I'm from Alabama, sure. And I think as I went on, I found that food is just like this incredible place to find stories because everyone has opinions on like movies and TV shows, but we probably haven't necessarily seen all the same ones. But everyone has an interaction with food every day, whether that's about your opinions about French fries or about lack of food or about restrictions or about anxiety about it or about like really trying to figure out a recipe. It's such a compelling force in everyone's life, and so it's such a good place to find stories. And so even when you take just like a very narrow slice of it, like for example breakfast, it's just amazing how much can come out of there. Just like talking to people who are line order cooks at diners, or like people who are finding new and advanced like ways to make maple syrup that is fake taste like maple syrup that is real. There's just so much going on, and if you are someone who like is a low-key nerd who just like loves to learn about stuff and like dive into these little subcultures and like learn about a lot of niche drama between like pancake brands or something, then it's an incredible place to be. And there are so many interesting voices working in food now, and I feel like, like Kehlani, I feel like a lot of what I like about working in food media is opening that up and like talking to people and trying to figure out like, okay, but like how did you make this in your kitchen? Like what did you do at your house? What is the difference between these things? Because I feel like that's those minutiae is where the texture of our everyday lives is, and it's food is such an incredible way to access that.
Great.
So I got into food because I come from a very serious food family. So we grew up cooking basically 6 days a week. And my sister went off to culinary school and graduated basically becoming a chef. And then I became a food writer. And our parents were very adamant in never allowing us to order off the kids' menu. Like chicken fingers and French fries were not allowed. And I thank them every day for that because they, once I think it was one Sunday a month, my parents would take us to like a nicer restaurant in town or outside of town, and because they liked going out to eat and they wanted us to experience that, and they didn't want us to grow up as picky eaters and have a really big palate despite my shellfish allergy. And so we were just taught to eat like adults and just try everything once. So I think that was probably the foundation for me, is that my parents are serious eaters, serious cooks. We also grew up watching everything on the Food network, and like we're nerds about like going to Bobby Flay's restaurant and meeting Bobby Flay. Like, I was thinking about that today. I was like, oh my God, I met Bobby Flay, like when I was like 10. Like, that's insane. You know, we were a family that was a huge Bourdain family. You know, like I got to interview him a few times. So we were all just serious about food. And the writing thing, similar to Kay, like I started off as a writing and doing marketing for a travel startup back in 2008 to 2010, and then naturally found myself just like writing about what I was eating. I similarly did not have money to travel, but I was like managing all these freelancers that were like reporting back from Spain and backpacking. So I was just like, you know what, I work in New York City, I'll just like write about what I'm eating in New York City. And then finally, similarly, I saved up money to take my first trip to Spain for 2 weeks. That's when I started having my blog and writing about it there, and then just kind of like developed a following. But I will say, like, I lived and worked in New York for 10 years and was doing the writing thing, but it wasn't until I moved to Philly. Kay can testify that she was one of the first 3 people, I think, that I met. And like what I have found here in Philadelphia, despite I think our community being very small, is that it is very much a pay it forward community. And so my writing really did not take off until I started writing here in Philadelphia. And, you know, like Kaylani would introduce me to someone or take me to an event, and then it would stem from, you know, it would kind of like grow from there. And I would say that even more so, my writing took off for series, like for real skis, when the pandemic hit, and I found myself writing a lot and journaling a lot. And the other thing that was really helpful, and I'm not sure how many are still around just because I'm not sure how much like in-person classes there are, but I took a ton of travel and food writing classes, like night classes with Blue Stoop and at the University of the Arts. And those were tremendously helpful. I think I took like probably 5 classes, even while I was writing professionally, if you can say, because they were just so helpful, like with writing prompts and just kind of flexing creative muscles. You know, Bourdain used to say this, like there's a point in his show where he's like, how much more can I describe this fucking food? You know, like I'm running out of words. And I think about that. I have to write the Resi hit list every month, and every month I'm like, how much more can I say farm to table? You know, like, so like taking those classes like just kind of like helps with those muscle skills, and also you know, gets you in a different lens and a different POV to excel and practice and perfect your writing. So yeah.
Philly loves you back. That's a really good thing. So let's like dive a little bit deeper into that, because I think you put so much effort into that, the learning process of it. You know, for anybody here, you know, what were those feelings like when you were writing those first pieces? And, you know, and how did that translate, especially to now, as, you know, you're so deep into it now, you've had so much time to really reflect on, you know, your journey, your career, however you want to name it. What's the difference from then to now for you, and how do you keep learning as you go along that journey, if that makes sense?
Writing is fucking hard, like so hard. The hardest part about writing is writing. Like, it doesn't matter how many times I write a big feature or 150 words for Resi, it is so hard. And I'm the worst writer because I'm like, I'm not really feeling it, so I don't think I'm gonna write today. Like, don't give me a deadline. Like, I really need to be in the zone. So I could be the most accomplished writer, but it's still really hard to sit down in front of that computer screen and type a one word, to me personally. And so what helps me is reading as much as possible. Like, I read a lot of food memoirs, but also I try to read as many varied topics as possible. So like one of the things that I've incorporated into my nighttime reading is reading The Monocle, which I'm obsessed with. For a couple reasons. One, get me out of like the food kind of words and repeat it, you know, hearing the same words over and over again. But also, like, you kind of need to reset your brain every once in a while so that you can get the fresh ideas. So reading as much as humanly possible is super helpful. And having people, and I've done this a few times, having people that you can even share like a crappy first draft with to get some gut feedback, I think is super helpful. I've done that with Joey a bunch of times where it's not even an Inquirer piece, but Joey will read it. So having someone that you can bounce some ideas with, even like sometimes I just give it to my husband. I'm like, I wrote this, read it. You tell me what's working, what's not working. So that's incredibly helpful, I would say. And having great editors, which we will talk about in a little bit.
I mean, when I started writing food things, I felt like I was a tiny baby and everyone else was like a Michelin star chef. And I was like, like carrots, I eat them, it's fine. And I think the process of like of writing a lot more and then not being lucky enough to be on staff at food places, and then actually going to culinary school because I was just like, all right, I gotta know the mother sauces. Like, what's this French hierarchy deal? Gotta know it. It turns out that you don't need any of that, and like you don't. Like, you have a story about food already, and you can probably tell it very well. You don't need to know mother sauces. You don't need to have the right knife. You don't need to like really like know who the right chefs or the cool people are. You don't need any of that. You just need a good story, which many people have. And I think what I am always learning is how little I know, like, I don't think there'll ever be a moment where I'm like, that's it, end of food, got it, moving on. Like learning a language where you're like constantly refreshing it and learning new angles and like figuring out new slang and like, oh, people are doing this really cool thing over here. And it feels really exclusive, and media definitely can be that way. It for sure is, but I just am not interested anymore in people telling me how I'm doing something wrong. And I'm way more interested in like being descriptive instead of prescriptive. And I think that is a big shift for me from the beginning, about being very worried about correctness to realizing that correctness is a fake idea, and you are using food and feeding yourself. There is not a way to do that incorrectly, despite all these structures telling you that there is. Like, you could eat ice cream every meal and no one would arrest you. It would be, like, you might feel kind of awful after a while, but like that, that's, I'm not gonna stop you. No one's gonna come in your kitchen and be like, take the spoon out of your hand. So for me, that was kind of the big difference from the beginning to where I am now.
Yeah, I wish more people had ice cream for their first part of the meals, the appetizer. Because, that's good. But to kind of touch on what you're saying, I know for Kehlani, you had a whole article about the best cheesesteaks in Philly, and you caught a lot of slack for it. And they're all haters because that is the most immaculate list of cheesesteaks in the city of Philadelphia. That's not hype. I mean that.
Thank you. I appreciate
so,
that.
like, how do you navigate stuff like that too? And also to touch on the question as well, but like, getting it wrong according to other people is just, no, that's not it. This is what I feel. This is my truth. Sharing that, and like, how do you navigate all that?
So I guess I'll start from the other question and kind of go into that. They're related. Like, having come from food through travel, one of the first travel publications that I got to work with, their motto was travel is people. And it's like, sounds kind of corny, but as I got more into it, I started to realize that, it's really the people that make the place. And like, when I started doing travel stories, it was, you'd hit the like, points of interest, why are they important, why, the consumer aspect of it. But I became like very, very interested more in the like, the specific artist who was in that time and in that place, like why was this city or why was that place kind of like working for that person in that moment, and how did they see the place that they were living in, and how did that place kind of facilitate their work. And so I just kind of started hovering more towards like who are the people that are like kind of making the place. And then what I started to find was I was connecting more to the food people, because food tended to, and kind of touching on what Margaret said, it like opens up this whole world where you get to see a place from like a really unique perspective. Like, oh, you go to Germany and you expect to find beer and sausage and all of those things. But if you look outside of that, there's actually like, you know, Turkish immigrants that came and completely shaped the country's street food through currywurst and through, you know, oh gosh, there's other ones. Like, oh, doner kebabs. Doner kebabs are really big. Or you go up to the north and suddenly you're in like the Hanseatic League area where, you know, there's actually fishing and like instead of sausages and everything, there's actually smoked fish and rot herring and pickled herring and things like that. And these are these things that were unexpected from what you would think that you'd find there. And so I just started hovering toward that cross section between food and travel, and that's kind of how I got into food. But the more that I explored food, it was kind of people stories, and it wasn't just about the people, it was also about that moment in time. And I kind of gained this appreciation because I love history too, but it is really fun to see like where a place has been, where it is now, how that influences where it is now, and how what they're doing now is gonna carry them forward. And so with the Bon Appetit, so if no one saw it, it was like I was commissioned to write a piece for Bon Appetit about like cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. Every publication was cheesesteaks in Philadelphia. And so I didn't want to do the like thing that you'd expect. The way that I approached the story was like, here's what the cheesesteak is, but because we have so many people that have come to Philadelphia over the years, this is how people are reimagining this thing that is quintessentially Philadelphian, and they're adopting it and making it their own. So I made sure to include an Ethiopian cheesesteak on the list. The Korean bulgogi cheesesteak is on the list. And like there's a Mexican cheesesteak on the list, and I think that those represent kind of that like they came here and they just like made it their own, and like so it became, the cheesesteak became this thing that like was like a canvas for their own culture, for them to express themselves, what it means to be like a Mexican American Philadelphian or an Ethiopian American Philadelphian or so on and so forth. And like, yeah, people gave me like flack for it. Like honestly, I will always, like in any guide that I do, there's always going to be your usual suspects. But because I also want to expand people's worlds and also include other diverse voices in the conversation who have a legitimate right to be part of the discourse, I will make you step outside of your bubble and point you in directions of places that you wouldn't expect. And people were like, this woke article. I was like, damn, woke, why? Like, there's nothing woke about it. I'm like, those are legitimate cheesesteaks.
Yeah, so thinking, that's really interesting because I was born and raised here, so, you know, I get really defensive when it comes to the cheesesteak, you know, because it's like I always tell people, best ones you get are from food trucks and corner stores and all that other stuff. But there are also other places that really do so great at just keeping true to what that is, but just introducing their own things to it. And I think that's what makes Philly so special, that it does have such a wide stroke of just like so many different perspectives and experiences when it comes to food. So with that in mind, for all of you, what surprised or surprises you about food in Philadelphia?
I'm sure the newest Philadelphian here, I'm sure I like, because I'm a little less than 2 years in, and I think, in my opinion, the incredible diversity of the food scene here is wildly underrepresented in like national press. Also, that article is great, and those commenters, you can send them to me. But I mean, I think what's so great about the Philly food scene is, one, it feels incredibly vital. There are all these amazing immigrant communities doing great work all the time, but there's also all these interesting little intersections where people can, because the barrier for entry is lower than it is in, say, New York, where I was living, and where if I was like, I'm gonna throw a cocktail pop-up, no, you're not. Like, what? How would you do that? What would you rent out? Like, how are you doing this? And within like 6 months of living here, I met a chef who owns a restaurant, and I made too many jokes about savory cocktails, and he was like, now you're coming to my restaurant and you're throwing a hard soup night. And I did, and like, I think that freedom is something that is amazing in the mix of the Philly food scene, and you can really feel that inventiveness. There's a lot of very traditional food too that's excellent, but I feel like these like little points of friction and connection are everywhere, and they're fascinating and interesting, and it feels so propulsive. It just feels like such an exciting place to be if you love food.
I will echo that. I think when I write the Resi hit list every month, I try and think, so I interview constantly chefs, GMs, bartenders. The text messages are insane. So I'm constantly talking to people who work in food, and so when I come to writing that monthly hit list, I try to put together like, okay, thematically, what have these conversations been like, or like, for June, what's going on in June that I can kind of like summarize. And I think I've had a lot of fun writing for the Resi hit list because I have kind of editorial freedom. So yes, it has to be some Resi restaurants, but I also include pop-ups or like chef collabs or like, the Southeast Asian food market down in FDR. And what I keep learning and what's so cool about the food scene here is that there's a tremendous amount of accessibility. And what I mean by that is like, also coming from New York many moons ago, to meet a chef was like, such like, you don't meet the chef. Mm-hmm. Here, like, I can tell you how many times I've been able to talk to people because there's no ego. Like, there's just none of that pretentiousness. And so you get to develop as a diner, like forget about us being food journalists, as a regular schmegular diner or as your regular local at a bar, you get to meet and have a relationship with the people that are producing your drinks or your food just by being a good diner. If you're a good guest, let's caveat that. Don't be a jerk. So if you're a good guest and you are a regular, like you get to develop relationships with people that are doing incredible things in the city. So I find that so heartwarming, like the welcomeness that I get from chefs and other writers and people just in the industry, I think has been so rewarding and so fun. I also will echo just the excitement. Like I keep telling people that I have to decline event invites because it's actually overwhelming. And I find that as a good thing, considering obviously what has happened over the past years. I personally cannot keep up with the amount of restaurant openings, bar openings, events, collabs, pop-ups. I'm like, whoa, like I have my Google Doc is like insane. Like I cannot keep up, and it's a really awesome problem to have, very first world problem to have. But the amount of collaboration and the amount of friendship and support that I see from food people and restaurant owners who want to prop up their friend who's just opening up a restaurant and wanting to help them get through all that stupid red tape. I think that's insanely rare and so incredibly powerful, and it just shows you how tight-knit the food community is here. And then, on the writing side, I always tell people, 'cause I think people, and by people I mean like either the general public or chefs or GMs might get scared when they're like, "There's a food writer here." I'm like, I'm not Laban. I'm not writing a 5,000 word review. I'm just here to ask you like 10 questions. So I like being able to just like put that kind of like ego aside and just have a normal conversation, and that is how I find the most interesting tidbits for whether it's a Resi hit list or a huge feature about Hispanic bartenders. So I think that's kind of the tight-knit community that I feel from so many angles in this community is really cool.
I guess so. Of the group of us, I've lived here a little bit longer. I grew up in the region. I grew up in South Jersey, but my grandparents were street vendors in Philadelphia, so they would often, because of lack of daycare, just bring me to their table at in front of City Hall, like in front of the clothespin, was where they would always set up every single day. And I feel like over the course of my lifetime, there was different cultures and different food and everything, but especially when I moved in 2010, it just kind of felt like there was a community that was starting to brew, a community of like really passionate self-starters that would they would open up food trucks or do pop-ups and things like that. I think one of the very first food articles I ever wrote was of a new, very quirky fried chicken and donut place that had opened up 2 blocks away from me, Federal Donuts. Literally, they were actually on Manton Street. They were at 2nd and Manton, and I was on 3rd and Manton. So just walking over. But yeah, over the years, like watching the community grow and also bring more people in and embrace people. But also, as I expanded my world and started traveling around the globe, I loved coming back to Philadelphia and realizing that like the communities that have come from, abroad, and they brought their foods with them, how intact they were able to keep their cultural cuisines down to really specific nuances. Like you can come to Philadelphia and we don't just have like the Thai food takeout. We have it and it's great, but we also have like really specific nuanced things like Laotian food. We have Kalea, where she's making really distinct food from the region where she grew up in, and same with like the Ethiopian food out in West Philly, which like West Philly is a beautiful place because I always like to say that you see the history is kind of layered, and each kind of layer kind of keeps its traditions and customs kind of intact and everything, and so that's why I really have become enamored with Philadelphia over the years. I didn't have to stay, like honestly, like once I got that inheritance, I could have just like left. I wanted to move to Germany. I wanted to move back to Germany, but I was like, I think I'm just gonna stick around, like, because there's something happening here, and there's bubbling, and I want to be part of it. And so it's just been really nice to, over the past, I guess at this point, how long have I been doing this? 12, 13 years, just developing relationships with the people that are here. And the longer that you get to know people, the more you get to understand like their personal stories and their passions and the things that they're hoping and planning to work on. And it's been kind of wonderful and a blessing to be part of that.
That's awesome. Sidebar, West Philly is best Philly, but I'm biased. But yeah, keeping that in mind though, I think you've all had some time here. You've all been in your careers or whatnot for some time now. What do you feel like are some of the shortcomings, the lackings, or the challenges that you encounter with your work?
I can start that off. So
Sure.
I think so I am an Emmy award-winning television host, right? And thank you. Television host, writer and host of another digital series. And I think like people have this like expectation that is like what I do all of the time. It is not actually. I do have a day job that is completely separate and outside of food. It's still in media, but it's like outside of food, and it's not directly even related to Philadelphia. I work with a company called McClatchy, and I work with their city guide sections and helping out with their service desks across the nation. So I've gotten to write about food like for Kansas City. So I did barbecue. I did a huge barbecue package for Kansas City last year. Right now I'm working with the Boise, Idaho Statesman, Raleigh Observer. Next is Fort Worth. Just helping with developing newsletter products with their teams. And I'm glad and I feel very fortunate. I feel like I'm learning some pretty valuable like skills that will help me continue down my own path. But it's hard to like go freelance. There have been pockets of time where I tried to do like the freelance writing, but it is a lot of work that sometimes does not like pay the most, unfortunately. And I love my work with WHYY too, but those are just like projects maybe once or twice a year. And of course the pandemic kind of, put the show on hiatus for 3 years, which, also kind of why I had to go back to a 9-to-5. But that project, that's only a few times out of the year. So for the rest of the year, I do have to have like some sort of stable income for myself. And so there's that aspect of it. But I think the hard and challenging part for me was there were so many times like I would get into an interview and be in like the last rounds of like being either a food writer or a food editor somewhere. And we would get to the conversation where they were like, so if we offered you this position, would you be willing to not do your television show anymore? And I was like, how could you ask someone not to do a TV show anymore? I'm like, I'm gonna of course pick the TV show, but everyone would be like, yeah, that's a conflict of interest, so we can't have you hosting a television show and working for this publication. So it was kind of hard to get work in food, like stable work in food writing and even travel writing, while also simultaneously having a television show. You would think that would be like a perk for some people. Or I've also, there was even at one point a fellowship opportunity that was like $15,000 less than what I was making at a previous job that I had had. And they too were like, well, you can't have a TV show. And I was like, wow, okay. But that was one of the hurdles that I've kind of, butt up against. But I still try to, I mean, it gives me the capacity and the time, like with the Bon Appetit article. I'm not putting them on blast or anything, but here's the reality of like freelance food writing. I got that assignment in January. It was due March, and I didn't get paid for it until last week. So you gotta be okay. Like, so if I were trying to do freelancing, I'd have to be okay with the and they weren't late at all. That was on time. That was just the payment terms. That was just how that rolled. So it's like, you kind of need to have some kind of stable income to be able to do this job.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a huge problem. Because I don't know if you heard, but media is dying. We're not doing great. And it's a huge problem because it means that freelancers don't get paid enough or on time. Even if you're on a staff job, you're still probably not making a huge amount of money, and you probably also have 500 other things you're doing. And it also means that we're missing out on a lot of stories from people because you have to find an alternative source of income, or you have to be privileged enough that it doesn't really matter. And that's a huge problem in the food media world. I think in the media world in general, but particularly in food, and it leads to, I think, really insular and circular thinking. It leads to everyone covering the same thing, and all of us like passing around the same mac and cheese recipe to be published every November. And that's bad for lots of reasons. Personally, I think it's boring. And also, you're just like missing out on this vast, diverse spectrum of other voices that we could be publishing because, rightfully, people don't want to wait for like 7 months to get paid, or they can't get the right editor's contact, or they do get the right editor's contact, but the editor has to do 700 jobs because people quit or get fired.
Or the editor moves every year or so.
Yeah, or the editor moves every year or so, and so you're like, cool, bye. Or the editor gets laid off, or the editor is suddenly a social media editor, even though that's not what they were hired to do, because all these things are happening constantly. So this stories that you get are just not the full spectrum of stories that we deserve to read as people who are interested in the topic. I think it's a huge problem.
I will echo the not being paid enough, not being paid on time. I accidentally became a full-time freelance writer when I got laid off of my cushy production job last summer, and that was, never again. I would never want to be back in that position. My Lord, for anybody that I know that's a full-time writer specifically, shout out to you. I don't know how you do it, but I personally could not. But I'm just as miserable at my day job, so who knows? I would say, so I've been having an interesting and maybe unique challenge that really hit me hard at the top of this year, where I got burnt out. I got to write so much over the last 2-3 years. It was fantastic. I was having so much fun, and then went on vacation to Miami in January. I decided to not be on my phone, and then I came back and I was like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to write anymore. And I was also kind of unemployed and waiting on checks, and I was like, this is tough. And then at the same time, kind of another first world problem, because I have written so frequently about largely Hispanic and Latino communities, I have been getting just an influx of messages and pitches and people wanting me to cover this person, and because I talked to this person, I should cover this person. Have you been to this restaurant? You haven't been to Cantina La Martina? How dare you? All these things were happening, and I was like, I don't know another Hispanic food writer, and so what I felt was this immense pressure to represent every single Latino in Philadelphia, and how dare I not go to every restaurant and write about it. And it just got so overwhelming that I had to just shut down. I really haven't done any writing since, besides the Resi Hit List, which I do every month, because I just got burnt out from the entire process of it all. And at the same time too, I don't know what's been happening, and maybe you can talk to your editor friends, but we lost so many editors. Where are all the editors?
Oh no, it's bad.
So I have an assignment that's just sitting in Google Docs, red fucking penned, and I have to start it over. But the editor, we don't have an editor, so I don't know where to go. So it's been a very challenging 6 months for me personally, and so I'm trying to figure out how can I get that mojo back despite all the challenges, because despite all of my complaints, writing about food is fucking great. It is so much fun. Honestly, it's so much fun. It's the best job ever.
It is. It's the most rewarding work, but when you have a lot of pressure put on it, when it is the deciding factor of your livelihood.
Totally.
That's when it starts to that's when it becomes a pain point, because I experienced that level of burnout last year around this time. Check Please had been off the air for 3 years. I didn't get a chance to go back and do that until last summer when we did the first round of filming, and then I just got done doing another round of filming, and that to me was my most rewarding project. So in that space in between during the pandemic, I wrote more than ever before. I got some of my biggest assignments, great projects that I was so proud of, but I just felt so depleted. It felt like such an extractive process, because it seemed like I was giving so much into this thing that I love, and it was not loving me back. And so I felt burnt out up until literally Check Please began, and I got a full-time day job, and then suddenly it was relief. That pressure came off of my passion and the thing that I loved, because I was being supported and compensated fairly. And Check Please really is an outlet for me to be able to connect with people over food in the way that I really love doing so. And to have that come back was a breath of fresh air for me. It brought more energy to me and gave me inspiration in a way that I didn't have for 3 years. Yeah.
Burnout is real. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of it all. It just needs a refresh, and sometimes that refresh can be really difficult to find and figure out, and sometimes it takes a while for things to return to you. But when they do, it's so rewarding, right? So knowing that, media's dying, I wonder what media's last meal would be. But with all the hope in our hearts for the people who may be listening, who may be here with us live today, and this will be sort of the wrap-up question here, what advice would you give them if they want to write about food? Whether it be professionally or just, for funsies.
I think media is just changing. I wouldn't say that it's dying. I feel like it's just changing.
I think that's fair. I didn't mean to be
pivoting.
so dramatic. I'm just a little.
But we're writers, so we're going to be dramatic.
You know what I mean? It's been dying for a long time. We're probably okay. It's been.
But I think it's just like another revolution. It's just another revolution.
Absolutely.
Of it. It's kind of like, did TV damage newspapers?
Sure.
There's all these throughout all of history. There's just like the evolution of these different things, and we have social media platforms now, and I give a lot of credit to not just the people who really valued and saw my perspective and gave me chances along my journey. I give a lot of thanks, and I'm extremely grateful to the people who took a chance on me. But the way that they a lot of them found me was through social media. And I think the best thing that I have ever done for my career was to have side projects that were always mine. And I'll give you an example. So in 2016, when Facebook Live was big, right? My now husband, John, and I had this little weekly series that we called Friday Night Cookies on a Facebook page that we called Foodful Thinking, right? And this was really just a way for me to learn how this platform and how this thing worked. And also, too, I was like, I want to figure out different ways to, do storytelling. How are people getting their information? They're getting their information on Facebook, so let's go to where they are. And also, too, there was I worked for a travel publication that had, that was big on video, right? There was also Pivot to Video Time. And I wanted to get more into video. I had played with video as a kid. I was in media classes in high school, and I had this experience in video. And I was like, guys, let me do video. I'm your social media director. I should be doing, Facebook Live. So I was testing out Facebook Live. We created Foodful Thinking and the show Friday Night Cookies. It was every week we would pick a cookie, and we would just deep dive into its history, get real nerdy about it. We talked about Toll House and the worst licensing deal to Nestle that could have ever happened. We talked about Hydrox cookie versus Oreo and how Oreo is actually the knockoff. Hydrox is the original. And then we had wine glasses, but with milk in them, and we do these dunkability tests, and they were just so raw. They were in my South Philly apartment, and they were just my cat would get involved. We talked about the history of pumpkin spice at one point, and we just did that really consistently for a few weeks. And the first few weeks, or we did rather for a few months, and the first few weeks nothing really happened, but then all of a sudden people started watching, and then suddenly there was a few months later 46,000 followers on the page. The series had millions of views. And I think it was just that moment of, it was Facebook prioritizing Facebook Live content because they wanted you to play with that platform. And I think I couldn't recreate that success in that same exact way, but just finding a thing and at the right moment, at the right time, with the right thing. And so I came out of that project and I presented it to the company I was working for, and I was like, hey, Facebook Live is a thing, but also there just seems to be this interest in the cross-section of food, history, and culture that people really are hungry for right now. And they laughed at me. They laughed at me. They laughed at me. But then I turned around and I ended up getting acqui-hired by Gannett, so USA Today. And they were like, we want to launch a food and travel publication, and you seem to have the skill and the knack for it. So they took that platform, turned it, and we spun it out into a whole food and travel publication called Eat Sip Trip at the time. And it actually launched the same exact month as The Takeout. and like a few and Gastro Obscura. So I was like, okay, I think we're onto something. I think like there is this like cross section between food and travel that people are really interested in. So that spun out into that opportunity, which was like a phenomenal job that I loved, that I had for about 5 years. And then I took all those foodful thinking videos and then I put them on YouTube and I put them on my portfolio website. And then when it came time to audition for Check Please, I heard stories of the VP of programming just watching my old videos of me ranting about like cookies. And so that led to that opportunity. So I think like the best advice that I could give to anyone is just like experiment, play, have fun, own something too. Like that's why I'm always really adamant that no matter how big of a job you have or whatever, have your own thing on the side, because you never know if it'll spin out or turn into something big or get acqui-hired by Gannett or turn into a television show. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Or just be an outlet too, you know, and it's yours and it's always there for you.
Oh, and then you get to do whatever you want with it, the way you want to do it.
It's freedom.
My advice is going to sound so optimistic after I said the media was, but just to be clear, media has always been dying in the same way like Walt Whitman said Brooklyn was over in like 1873. Like it's always been. There's never been a great time. It's fine. I think that's incredibly astute. I think it's that it's changing models and it's looking different, but it'll be there because I think everyone is always going to want to be told a good story. I don't think that will ever change. Good stories are a currency that will not lose any value no matter what happens to like Vice News.
Correct.
Yeah, like, and things will pop in and out of existence, and the place that you, like the home for the story that you're really obsessed with, it might not even exist yet, or the editor isn't there. Keep making stories happen. Like, use whatever platform makes sense to you. Use whatever format makes sense to you. But I mean, you know, because the old ways aren't working anymore doesn't mean new ways aren't going to work or don't exist. And I also don't think that like stories specifically about food are ever going to go away. It's one of the things that we keep coming back to. It's a constant in everyone's lives. And I think Kehlani's advice is incredibly good, that if you have an obsession, lean all the way into it. Just like get so weird and like just be the person who's like, you know what? I'm going to pitch this editor because I have like a lot of knowledge about this one obscure fruit. And I'd be like, yes, tell me everything you know about this fruit. Like, please. And I would also say, you know, pitch. Just like, if you are interested in writing for publications, like editors always need stories, and it's, I know, can be incredibly daunting because you're just like flinging a bunch of shapes and they're like, no, I don't want a square. No, I don't want a square. No, I don't want a square. And like things are shifting and it's not in your control. But as long as you are aware that it's actually not about you, it's not about like you have a good story and you believe in it, just because it's not a home somewhere else, don't stop. Like keep throwing it out there, and I promise you eventually it will find a good home or a listening ear, or it will take shape in a way that you never even expected at all. And also specifically pitch me if you have any Philly food stories. meeby@inquirer.com. Really, actually do it. But like I think it's just really important to believe in the value of really like the thing that you get excited about at a bar or like in an elevator or like the next time you're talking to your friend and you're just like, I just learned about this entire culture around this thing. Like I want to hear about that. Other people want to hear about it too. And so if you believe in the power of a story, hang on to it and keep working on it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I echo both of those things, and there are resources to help you pitch. There are resources to help you craft your stories, put structure to stories. Is Blue Stoop still around? Does anyone know? Yeah, shout out to Blue Stoop. Like, take those classes, they're great. The Joy Manning class that we took is so good. She was also a little bit of a negative Nancy, but so good in her but she needed, like, she gave us that reality check, which I thoroughly appreciate, and she's someone that, you know, is now a mentor. So yeah, seek out the resources from, I would definitely recommend Blue Stoop. Media Bistro is still around, as I found out. So shout out to Media Bistro. That's like 30 years old.
Yeah.
Go to that resource for pitching and just writing skills in general. I would say I'll pass forward the advice that has helped me with my writing is finding a gap or a niche that is not being told. Like we're saying, we are severely lacking editors and and writers for so many reasons, but don't let that deter you, because if you see coverage that isn't basically being done, then pitch it, or go do it yourself. And if you are too scared to pitch it to a publication or to share that idea, with an outlet, I say start a blog or start a video channel or start an Instagram and go in on that. I mean, for me, during the pandemic, I was the jumping off point for me to cover Hispanic and Latino stories was literally during the pandemic. I was like, where are my people? Someone's in North Philly, but I don't where. And so I just started doing a deep dive. Where are Puerto Rican people? Where are Caribbean people? Are we just a community of Mexican Americans, or are there? And so it just went into this whole kind of subset of how are all the ways I can cover Hispanic and Latino culture, not even just food culture, but culture in Philadelphia, and that has spun out into many stories that I'm very proud of. So if you find a gap or are seeing a gap or a lack of coverage, please be encouraged to do it yourself or share that idea, because we desperately need it. And honestly, I think that the more stories that we can tell, my dream is to see Philadelphia on this national radar more and more. We are very lucky to have James Beard Award nominated restaurants and bars. I want to see more. I'm tired of people coming here, doing a show, and just covering cheesesteaks. We need more stories. Let's go get them eating Ethiopian cheesesteaks. Let's get them eating, at different places. So I think the more stories from a varied POV and perspective, the better, because that just showcases what Philadelphia is all about. So,
Kaylani, Margaret, Alicia, thank you so much for this tasty conversation.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you all and just hearing people talk about food in such a wonderfully articulated and casual way that just feels accessible and real and authentic and expansive, and at the same time feels right at home. So thank you everyone who's listening. Thank you everyone who's here with us today. It's been a pleasure. And I guess we'll see you at all the restaurants and stuff. And thank you.
Want to get involved with Broad Street Review? Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com and click Get Involved at the top. While you're there, help keep us running and click Donate to find out how. Connect with us on social media, on Facebook and Twitter at BroadST Review. Thank you for helping to keep the conversation going.